The Apostle Paul, in this passage, beginning in chapter 12, but going on through chapter 13 and 14 as well, is trying to help the people of Corinth to understand what really should empower and characterize their congregational life. This was a very eclectic congregation that thought very highly of themselves. They had spiritual gifts that they knew and that they proclaimed. And so Paul is, in addition to other teaching, going to try to introduce the element of humility and the need of serving one another. He says in the following verse, "For just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. For in the one Spirit we were all baptized into one body, Jews or Greeks, slaves or free. We were all made to drink of the one Spirit. Indeed, the body does not consist of one member, but of many. If the foot would say, 'Because I am not a hand, I do not belong to the body,' that would not make it any less a part of the body." Paul is saying to the Corinthians, rather subtly, I believe, wake up. This is not a solo adventure you are on as a Christian. It is a team sport. And we need to think as a team, and we need to act as a team. We're one mosaic. And it's important to know your place in the mosaic, but not for your own glorification, not for your own self-gratification, but for what you can do, what you can contribute to the team as a whole. Now, in this very vein, for the last 40 years or so, there's been a lot of talk about the first 12 verses of chapter 12. This is one of the 4 key places in all of the New Testament that talk about spiritual gifts and what they are and how they're to be used. If you were to go to any church supply catalog, any denominational website, you will find plenty of information about spiritual gifts, and it will be entitled something like Spiritual Gifts Inventory, and it'll be a little test that you can take to discover what your spiritual gifts are. I put it in a web browser and found Spiritual Gifts Inventory produces 167,000 hits. So this is not hard to find information anywhere. But when you go, it will purport to tell you what your gifts are, if they're teaching or healing or administration or shepherding or any of a host of others. And if you've never taken such a test, I'd encourage you to do so, just so you know what's going on in the Christian world. And it is somewhat amusing to see what comes up in those tests. But don't rely on them. This whole spiritual gifts inventory approach to how it is we will serve in the life of the congregation is built on an understanding of the word spiritual gift that is erroneous. And I wish that I could walk with you through the 16 pages of dense scholarly work that proves this point quite conclusively. And if anyone wants to see it, I'm happy to email it to you. But the result is this. The English language has 2 words, or 2 meanings for the word gift. The first is some special ability, some aptitude, such as you are gifted musically, or you are gifted intellectually, or you are gifted in financial matters. The second understanding is the one that may be a bit more common to us. When we give someone a gift, an item, something that one person gives to another. There's these 2 understandings, the first of which has erroneously been attached to spiritual gifts. The understanding that we each have some special abilities, some aptitudes, some ability to either teach or heal or whatever, that's obvious. There are certain people that are gifted in that way. And that's the conventional understanding of what we should be doing. Our spiritual gifts should determine how it is we serve the body of Christ. But if you look deeper into the writings of the Apostle Paul, you'll uncover that it is the second meaning of gift that applies to spiritual gifts. That is, any specific service, any ministry opportunity that you, by the power of the Holy Spirit, are able to offer the community of faith, that is your spiritual gift. The spiritual gift then is, if you wanted to define it, it is the positive willingness to do what the Spirit of God gives you to do. And it doesn't matter whether you have any aptitude in the area or not. For example, in a host of churches, I've known quite a number of financial secretaries who record what it is that the members of the church give to the church's treasury. And many of these financial secretaries do the work not because they have some special training that empowers them to do so, not because they have a mind for numbers, but simply because it needs to be done and nobody else is stepping up to do it. We find church school teachers in that same category who volunteer not because they believe they are the best teachers in all of the planet, but because the children need someone to describe to them what it means to be a faithful Christian, and no one else is stepping forward. I would dare say most of the members of church committees believe that they are there serving not because they have some special ability which allows them to make decisions on behalf of the church that are the very best, but they're there serving because somebody needs to do it. They heard the call and they answered the call. If they accept this gift of an opportunity to serve, they are making their spiritual gift in Paul's understanding. We look at our roster of church leaders and teachers and elders and deacons, men and women who run the committees here in church, who lead our outreach efforts, who get the work of the church and the world done. Even a congregation as blessed as University Christian Church with fine leaders, even a congregation such as ours, requires of individuals a willingness to step up, to embrace a task, and to move forward with it, even though they don't feel adequately prepared to do so. So this second understanding of spiritual gift presumes that there is another wisdom that surpasses the individual, that the Christian body as a whole has and expresses a wisdom that seeks out the gifts of members of the community to act in certain ways that are going to be beneficial for the congregation and for the community. We often say that the individual is the one who senses the call, whether it's to ordination or whatever. The individual senses the call, but it's the community that confirms the call. I'm going to give a specific example that will be very familiar to Jimmy Cobb, who is our representative to the regional committee on the ministry. It meets 3 times a year in Fort Worth for the better part of a week and is helping dozens and dozens of seminarians along the path towards ordination. Now, all of those people who are coming before the committee have a sense of call. If they didn't have a sense of call, they wouldn't be in the track for ordination. But it is the task, the duty of the regional committee on the ministry to examine these people and to discern whether or not they are likely to be of benefit as pastors and educators in our churches, or whether they might harbor some trait, some lack of education that could actually do great harm to the churches. And every once in a while, that regional committee on the ministry says to someone who thought they were called to ministry, "We don't see it in you. We think you have some other ministry that you should be responding to. We, as the gathered community, think God has other plans for you." There's nothing wrong with a good fit between one's aptitudes and one's service in the church. It's great when that happens, but it's not necessary. Tomorrow, the holiday will call us to think more deeply about the civil rights movement in the last century. Consider this question. On December 1st, 1955, sitting down on a Montgomery, Alabama bus, do you believe that Rosa Parks thought that she was somehow especially well prepared, especially well educated, in order to refuse to give up her seat on the bus to a white man who wanted it? My bet is she didn't feel like she was the best prepared. She didn't feel like she was the most courageous. She wasn't even sure if God was selecting her for this perilous task, but somebody needed to do it. And Rosa Parks said, yes, I'll do it. Of her act of defiance that day, Martin Luther King Jr. said, she was not planted there by the NAACP or any other organization. She was planted there by her personal sense of dignity and self-respect. She was anchored to that seat by the accumulated indignities of days gone by and by the boundless aspirations of generations yet unborn. She was a victim of both the forces of history and the forces of destiny. She had been tracked down by the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time. And Rosa Parks said yes to it. And so did King. Tomorrow we celebrate the gifts offered to our nation by one man who embodied both aspects of giftedness that we have explored today. He had a talent, he had an aptitude. He was prepared to be a leader in the civil rights movement when we needed one. And he also was ready to accept that challenge, the second understanding of gift. He had an abiding commitment that the Spirit set before him, and to which he said yes. He said, there must be a recognition of the sacredness of human personality. Deeply rooted in our political and religious heritage is the conviction that every man and woman is an heir to a legacy of dignity and worth. And that sounds a lot like Paul's telling us that members of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable and ever more important to the body. It sounds a lot like Paul saying that God has so arranged the body that members might have care for one another, and if one member suffers, all suffer. If one member is honored, all are honored. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us of this deeply rooted hope of God's blessed kingdom on earth, what he called the beloved community. He said, the foundation of the beloved community is a divine indwelling that equally graces all people. There is no graded scale of essential worth. There is no divine right of one race which differs from the divine right of another. Every human being has etched in his or her own personality the indispensable stamp of the Creator. You know, Sue Moss, our board president, has been writing some emails this past week. Some of you have received them. She's been trying to pull together our nominating committee for its work this winter and this spring. The nominating committee will then in turn look at the leadership needs of our congregation and will begin contacting those of us in this room this morning. Be contacting us, asking us if we will be willing to serve on this committee or serve in this fashion. It's an opportunity for the use of our spiritual gifts. It's an opportunity for those of us without special qualification for some role that the leadership of the church has in mind for us to say yes. Now, the opportunity doesn't predict the outcome, but the opportunity does demand a response. And so when our nominating committee, our nominating council gives you a call, what will your answer be?